Zara's crystalline fingers drummed against the control panel as she watched her human husband, David, tend to their small garden on the observation deck. The Caltharian female had always found his gentle nature endearing, though her fellow crew members aboard the research vessel Stellar Dawn often questioned her choice in mates. "I still don't understand what you see in that soft creature," Commander Vex had said just yesterday, his four arms gesturing dismissively. "Humans are barely more advanced than the primitive species we study. No natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no psychic abilities. They're essentially walking vegetables." Zara had defended David then, as she always did, but sometimes she wondered if her colleagues were right. David worked as the ship's botanist, spending his days nurturing delicate plants and speaking to them in hushed, caring tones. He never raised his voice, never showed aggression, and seemed genuinely incapable of harming even the smallest insect that occasionally found its way into their quarters. The Stellar Dawn housed a crew of 200 beings from across the galaxy, all dedicated to studying primitive civilizations and cataloging new species. Zara served as the chief xenobiologist, a position that commanded respect among her peers. Her people, the Caltarians, were known for their analytical minds and crystalline exoskeletons that could withstand extreme temperatures and pressures. They were also known for their pragmatic approach to relationships, which made her bond with David all the more puzzling to outsiders. David looked up from his tomato plants and caught her watching him. His face broke into that warm smile that had first captured her attention 3 years ago on the research station orbiting Kepler, 442b. He waved, and she found herself returning the gesture despite her current contemplative mood. "Zara, you need to see this," came a voice from behind her. She turned to find Dr. Kyth, the ship's communications officer, approaching with what appeared to be urgent news. The insectoid being's antennae were twitching rapidly, a sure sign of distress among his species. "What is it?" she asked, noting how David had stopped his work and was now walking toward them, drawn by the obvious tension in Dr. Kyth's posture. "We've received a distress signal from the Terran colony on Proxima Centauri b," Dr. Kyth explained, his multiple eyes darting between Zara and the approaching human. "The signal is concerning. The colonists are under attack by an unknown alien force. They're requesting immediate assistance from any nearby vessels." David's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "How many people are on that colony?" he asked, his voice steady but with an underlying edge that Zara had never heard before. "Approximately 50,000 humans, including many families with children," Dr. Kyth replied. "The attackers appear to be a previously unknown species. The colonists described them as massive, heavily armored beings with advanced weaponry." Zara watched as something changed in David's eyes. The gentle botanist who had been tenderly caring for his plants moments before now stood perfectly still, his jaw set in a hard line. For the first time since she'd known him, David looked dangerous. "How long until we reach the colony?" David asked, his voice now carrying a cold precision that sent an unexpected chill through Zara's crystalline form. "At maximum speed, approximately 18 hours, Dr. Kyth answered, clearly puzzled by the human's sudden intensity. David nodded slowly, then turned and walked toward the communication console. "I need to send a message to the colony. They need to know help is coming." As David worked at the console, Zara noticed other changes in his demeanor. His movements had become more deliberate, more purposeful. Gone was the relaxed, almost meandering way he typically moved through the ship. This David moved like a predator, though she couldn't quite understand why that word had come to mind. Proxima Colony. This is David Chun aboard the research vessel Stellar Dawn. He spoke into the communicator, his voice carrying an authority she'd never heard from him before. "We're 18 hours out. I need you to gather all civilians in the most secure structures you have. Arm anyone who can fight, but keep non-combatants away from the perimeter. We're coming." The response came through, crackling with static and punctuated by what sounded like explosions in the background. "This is Colony Administrator Sarah Williams. Thank God someone received our signal. The attackers, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. They seem to be toying with us, testing our defenses. We've lost 12 people already. David's hands clenched into fists. Ma'am, I need you to document everything you can about these attackers. Their weapons, their tactics, their apparent weaknesses. Send all data to this vessel immediately. And Administrator Williams? Yes. Tell your people that help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer. After ending the transmission, David turned to face Zara and Dr. KYTH. The transformation in him was so complete that Zara barely recognized the man she'd married. Gone was every trace of the gentle soul who spent his days nurturing life. In his place stood someone who looked capable of taking it. I need to speak with Commander Vex, David said. We need to discuss the ship's defensive capabilities. David, Zara said softly, we're a research vessel. Our weapons are minimal, designed only for asteroid clearing and basic defense against space debris. We're not equipped for combat. David looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold depths she'd never seen before. Zara, there are things about humans that your people don't understand. Things we don't talk about because we've learned to be ashamed of them. But when our children are threatened, when innocent people are dying, he paused, running a hand through his hair. Sometimes the monster serves a purpose. The words sent another chill through Zara's form. In all their time together, David had never spoken of humans as anything other than peaceful explorers and scientists. The idea that they might be capable of something darker had never occurred to her. I don't understand, she said. David's expression softened slightly as he looked at his wife. I hope you never have to, he replied. But those people on Proxima Colony are about to find out why humans survived long enough to reach the stars, despite having no natural weapons, no armor, no psychic abilities. He walked toward the bridge, leaving Zara standing in confusion and growing concern. As she watched him go, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was seeing her husband clearly for the first time, and what she was seeing terrified her more than she cared to admit. Dr. KYTH's antennae continued twitching as he watched the human disappear around corner. Zara, he said quietly, I've never seen a human behave like that before. Are you certain your species is as harmless as they claim to be? Zara stared at the empty corridor where David had vanished, her analytical mind racing through everything she thought she knew about humans. They were peaceful, gentle, intellectually curious, but physically weak. They had no natural defenses, no aggressive instincts, no warrior culture. Everything she learned about them suggested they were among the most benign species in the galaxy. So why did every instinct she possessed suddenly suggest otherwise? The ship's intercom crackled to life with Commander Vex's voice. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. As Zara made her way to the bridge, she couldn't shake the image of David's transformed expression from her mind. For the first time in their relationship, she realized she might not know her husband as well as she thought she did. And, judging by the cold determination in his eyes, she was about to learn something about humanity that might change everything she believed about the gentle species she'd fallen in love with. The bridge buzzed with activity as crew members from various species worked at their stations. Commander Vex stood at the center, his four arms coordinating multiple displays simultaneously. When David entered, every being on the bridge turned to look at him, and Zara noticed that several of them took an unconscious step backward. Mr. Chun, Commander Vex said, his voice carrying its usual dismissive tone, I understand you wish to discuss our response to this colonial crisis. While I appreciate your concern for your fellow humans, I must remind you that this is a research vessel, not a military ship. We are not equipped for combat situations. David moved to the central display, his movements still carrying that new predatory grace. Commander, with respect, you're thinking about this wrong. You don't need a military ship. You need to understand what you're carrying. And what exactly are we carrying? Vex asked, his tone suggesting he was humoring what he saw as an emotional human. David's smile was unlike any expression Zara had ever seen on his face. It was cold, calculating, and utterly without warmth. You're carrying a human, Commander. And humans don't just study predators. We are predators. We're just usually very good at pretending otherwise. The bridge fell into an uncomfortable silence as David's words hung in the air. Commander Vex's forearms crossed over his chest in a gesture of obvious skepticism, while the other crew members exchanged uncertain glances. Zara watched her husband carefully, trying to reconcile this cold, calculating version of David with a man who had spent the morning gently coaxing his tomato seedlings to grow. "Mr. Chun," Commander Vex said finally, "I think your emotional attachment to the situation may be clouding your judgment. Humans are researchers, explorers, farmers. Your own personnel file indicates you're a botanist. You tend plants for a living." David nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact with the commander. "Yes, I grow things. I understand life cycles, adaptation, survival mechanisms. I understand what it takes for a species to thrive in hostile environments." He moved closer to the main display, showing the Proxima colony's location. "But before humans grew things, Commander, we hunted things. And we were very, very good at it." Dr. KYTH's antennae twitched nervously. "What exactly are you suggesting, David?" "I'm suggesting that you've all fundamentally misunderstood what humans are," David replied, his voice carrying an edge of certainty that made several crew members shift uncomfortably. "You see our lack of natural weapons and assume we're weak. You see our diplomatic nature and assume we're pacifists. You see our curiosity and assume we're harmless." He activated the display, bringing up a three-dimensional map of the Proxima system. "But you've never asked yourselves how a species without claws, without armor, without psychic abilities, without any apparent advantages, managed to become the apex predator on a planet filled with creatures that were stronger, faster, and better armed than we were." Zara found herself leaning forward, captivated despite her growing unease. "How did they?" she asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. David's smile returned, and it was even colder than before. "We learned to think like prey until we understood everything about how they moved, how they hunted, how they lived. And then we learned to think like predators until we could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast anything that threatened us. We didn't just survive on Earth, Zara. We dominated it so completely that we had to learn to be gentle just to keep from destroying everything around us." The ship's communications system suddenly crackled to life with another transmission from Proxima Colony. The voice was strained, punctuated by the sounds of battle in the background. "Any vessel in range. This is Colony Administrator Williams. The attacks have intensified. They're probing our defenses systematically, like they're studying us. We've lost contact with the outer perimeter. Requesting immediate assistance." David moved to the communication console without asking permission. "Administrator Williams, this is David Chun. Describe the attackers' behavior patterns. Are they operating in groups? Do they have a command structure? Are they taking prisoners or just killing?" "They're definitely organized," came the reply. "Groups of 5 to 7 individuals, moving in coordinated patterns. They seem to be testing different approaches to our defenses rather than just overwhelming us with numbers. And this is strange, but they haven't targeted our children's areas specifically, even though those would be easier targets." David nodded grimly. "They're hunters, not berserkers. They're studying you like prey, learning your patterns before they commit to a full assault. How many of them have you seen? Maybe 30 or 40 total. But they're massive, David. Each one looks like it could tear through our defensive barriers with its bare hands." "Understood. Continue defensive positions and keep documenting their behavior. We'll be there soon." After closing the transmission, David turned back to the assembled crew. "Commander Vex, I need you to understand something. Those attackers are making the same mistake you are. They see humans as weak prey because we don't look like predators. They're studying the colonists, learning their patterns because that's how hunters operate. But they don't know they're not hunting prey." "What do you mean?" Commander Vex asked, his dismissive tone beginning to waver. "They're hunting other hunters," David explained, pulling up tactical displays that Zara had never seen him access before. "Humans have been the hunted, and the hunters for millions of years. We know every trick, every strategy, every weakness that predators have because we've been all of those things. Those attackers are about to learn what happens when you corner a species that conquered an entire planet not through strength, but through being smarter and more ruthless than everything else that lived there. Dr. Kyeh stepped forward, his insectoid features showing obvious concern. David, even if what you're saying is true, we're still talking about 40 unknown hostiles against 50,000 civilians. The mathematics don't favor the colonists. David's expression grew even colder. You're still thinking about this wrong, Doctor. You're assuming the 40 attackers are the predators and the 50,000 humans are the prey. But humans learned a long time ago that the best way to survive being hunted is to make the hunters become the hunted. He began manipulating the display, showing tactical information that seemed far beyond what a botanist should know. Every human on that colony knows things that these attackers don't. They know how to set traps that look like weaknesses. They know how to coordinate attacks that appear to be defensive retreats. They know how to turn a predator's confidence into its greatest vulnerability. Zara watched in fascination and growing alarm as David continued to demonstrate knowledge she'd never suspected he possessed. David, where did you learn all this? For the first time since the conversation began, David's expression softened as he looked at his wife. Every human learns this, Zara. We just don't talk about it, because we've spent centuries trying to move beyond it. But it's always there, waiting for when it's needed. It's why human children play games about hunting and hiding, why our entertainment focuses on conflict and survival, why we're drawn to stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they're threatened. He turned back to Commander Vex. Sir, I'm not asking you to turn this research vessel into a warship. I'm asking you to get me to that colony so I can teach those attackers something they clearly don't know about humans. And what's that? Vex asked. That the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all. The bridge fell silent again as the crew processed David's words. Zara found herself studying her husband's face, searching for traces of the gentle man she'd married. They were still there, she realized, but they were overlaid with something harder, something that spoke of capabilities she'd never imagined. Commander, David continued, I need access to the ship's fabrication systems. The colonists will need equipment, but not the kind you might expect. They don't need bigger weapons or stronger armor. They need the tools to turn their environment into a weapon. What kind of tools? Vex asked, his skepticism now mixed with curiosity. David's smile returned, and this time Zara saw something in it that made her crystalline form shiver. The kind that let a species of hairless primates become the most feared hunters on a planet filled with things that could kill them with a single swipe of their claws. He activated another display, showing manufacturing specifications that seemed to pull from databases Zara hadn't known existed. Motion sensors, timer mechanisms, chemical accelerants, structural weak points, pressure systems. Nothing exotic, nothing that requires advanced technology. Just simple tools that become devastating when you understand how predators think. You're talking about traps, Dr. Kyeh observed. I'm talking about turning the entire colony into a trap, David corrected. These attackers are studying human defensive patterns because they assume humans fight like every other prey species they've encountered. They're expecting panic, desperate charges, uncoordinated resistance. They're not expecting humans to fight like humans. Commander Vex studied the displays David had activated, his four arms working to process the information. These specifications, where did they come from? Every human settlement maintains them, David replied matter-of-factly. Emergency protocols, survival contingencies, defensive preparations. We call it preparedness planning, but what it really is instructions for turning any environment into a killing field if necessary. The casual way David said those words sent another chill through Zara. This wasn't the man who sang to his plants, who couldn't bring himself to swat the flies that occasionally bothered him during his work. This was someone else entirely, someone who spoke of killing fields as if they were just another tool in a toolbox. David, she said quietly. Are you saying that humans have been preparing for war this entire time, even while proclaiming to be peaceful? David turned to her, and for a moment, she saw the gentle botanist again. No, Sada, we've been preparing for survival. There's a difference, though I understand why it might not look that way from the outside. His expression hardened again. But when someone threatens our children, when they come for our families, when they assume we'll just roll over and die because we look harmless, that's when the difference stops mattering. He looked around the bridge at the assembled crew. Every species in this room evolved on worlds where they were either the dominant predator or they developed defenses that made predators avoid them. Humans evolved on a world where we were prey, but we refused to accept that role. We learned to think like predators, hunt like predators, kill like predators, but most importantly, we learned to be smarter than predators. The communication system crackled again with another transmission from the colony. This time, the voice was different, younger, more panicked. This is Dr. Martinez at the colony's research station. Administrator Williams is dead. They broke through the eastern perimeter about an hour ago. These things, they're not just hunters, they're sadists. They're taking their time, making it last. We need help now, or there won't be anyone left to save. The change that came over David at these words was visible to everyone on the bridge. If he had seemed dangerous before, now he looked absolutely lethal. When he spoke, his voice was so cold that frost might have formed around his words. Dr. Martinez, this is David Chun. I need you to listen very carefully. Are you the senior staff member remaining? Yes, but I don't know how much longer we can. Doctor, stop talking and listen. You're not prey. You never were prey. You're human, which means you're the descendant of the most successful hunters in the history of your planet. Those things killed Administrator Williams, which means they've just made the worst mistake any predator can make. What mistake? Came a shaky reply. David's smile could have frozen starlight. They just proved to 50,000 humans that negotiation isn't an option. The next several hours aboard the Stellar Dawn revealed a side of human organization that left the alien crew members stunned. David had essentially taken over the ship's fabrication systems, working with an efficiency and purpose that seemed impossible for someone who supposedly spent his days tending to plants. Zara watched from the observation deck as containers of equipment began forming in the manufacturing bay, each one precisely designed for purposes she was only beginning to understand. Zara, Commander Vex approached, his usual authoritative demeanor notably subdued. Your husband has been accessing manufacturing databases that I wasn't aware humans had clearance for. Military-grade specifications, advanced tactical protocols, survival technologies that seem far beyond civilian applications. Zara's crystalline features reflected the manufacturing bay's lights as she considered the commander's words. I'm beginning to suspect that the distinction between civilian and military applications might not mean what we thought it did when it comes to humans. Through the communication system, they could hear David coordinating with Dr. Martinez and the other survivors on Proxima Colony. His voice had taken on the tone of someone who clearly expected to be obeyed, and, more disturbing to Zara, someone who clearly knew how to command in crisis situations. Dr. Martinez, I need you to identify every person in the colony who has engineering, chemistry, or construction experience. Don't worry about their official job titles. I need people who understand how things work, how they break, and how to make them break in specific ways. David, I'm a xenobotanist, not a military commander, came the reply. I don't know how to organize people for combat. You're not organizing them for combat, Doctor. You're organizing them for something humans are much better at than combat. You're organizing them for problem solving. Zara moved closer to the communication console, fascinated despite her growing unease. What kind of problems? David noticed her approach and activated the visual display, showing her a three-dimensional model of the Proxima Colony that was now overlaid with what appeared to be tactical information. The problem of making approximately 40 hostile entities cease to exist while protecting 50,000 civilians in the process. The casual way he spoke about making living beings cease to exist sent another chill through Zara's form. David, you're talking about killing them. David paused, looking directly at her with eyes that seemed to hold depth she'd never noticed before. Zara, they killed Administrator Williams. They're torturing civilians for their own amusement. They came to this colony not for resources, not for territory, not for any purpose other than to cause suffering. So yes, I'm talking about making them cease to exist. The only question is whether we do it efficiently or whether we let them continue to murder families while we debate the ethics of stopping them. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the communicator again. David, I've gathered the people you requested. What exactly do you want us to do? First, I need you to understand something about the situation you're in, David replied, his attention returning to the colony. These attackers are confident because they believe humans are prey. They're taking their time because they think they've already won. They're playing with you because they don't see you as a threat. He manipulated the colony display, highlighting specific structures and pathways. But they've made several critical errors. They've shown you their numbers, their weapons, their tactics, and their behavioral patterns. More importantly, they've given you time. And, Doctor, giving humans time to think is the worst mistake any predator can make. I don't understand. You're about to, David replied. I'm sending you manufacturing specification for devices that can be built using materials you already have in the colony. Some of them are going to look like maintenance equipment. Some are going to look like scientific instruments. None of them are going to look like weapons, because the best weapons humans make don't look like weapons at all. Zara watched as David transmitted complex manufacturing data to the colony. The specifications were unlike anything she'd seen before, combining seemingly innocent components into configurations that served purposes she couldn't immediately identify. What are those? She asked. Solutions to the problem of being hunted by something bigger, stronger, and better armed than you are, David replied. Humans solved this problem a long time ago, Zara. We learned that you don't fight predators directly. You make them fight the environment, the situation, their own confidence, and ultimately their own instincts. On the communication channel, Dr. Martinez sounded confused. David, these specifications, this looks like equipment for atmosphere processing, water filtration, structural maintenance. How is this supposed to help us fight? David's smile was becoming familiar to Zara now, and she was beginning to understand why it made her so uncomfortable. It was the smile of someone who saw several moves ahead in a game where the other players didn't even know they were playing. Doctor, those attackers are breathing your air, drinking your water, walking on your structures, and moving through your environment. What would happen if all of those things suddenly stopped being safe? The silence that followed was profound. Even Commander Vex seemed to be reconsidering everything he thought he knew about humans. Dr. KYEH's antennae had stopped twitching entirely, a sign of deep concentration among his species. You're talking about turning the entire colony into a trap, Dr. Martinez said finally. I'm talking about turning the entire colony into a selective trap, David corrected. One that only affects uninvited guests who happen to be murdering the residents. The atmosphere processors will still work for humans, but they'll create an environment that's problematic for beings who aren't adapted to the specific atmospheric mix that humans prefer. The water filtration will still provide clean water for humans, but it will introduce compounds that are harmless to human physiology, but potentially fatal to unknown alien biochemistries. Zara felt a chill of understanding. You're poisoning them. I'm creating an environment that favors the survival of the species that belongs there, David replied with clinical precision. It's what humans have always done, Zara. We change the environment to suit us rather than adapting ourselves to suit the environment. We've been doing it for so long that we forget it's actually a form of warfare. Commander Vex stepped forward, his forearms working nervously. Mr. Chun, what you're describing sounds like the systematic elimination of species based on biological differences. David's expression hardened. Commander, what I'm describing is the systematic protection of 50,000 innocent humans from 40 hostile entities who came to their home for the purpose of causing suffering and death. If you want to debate the ethics of that, we can do so after we've ensured that no more children die while we're having philosophical discussions. The communication channel crackled with Dr. Martinez's voice. David, some of the people here are concerned about the permanence of what you're suggesting. If we implement these changes to our life support systems, won't it affect our ability to interact with other alien species in the future? Doctor, the changes are all reversible if you want them to be, David replied. But ask yourself this. How many other alien species have visited your colony in the 3 years since it was established? Well, none, and how many of those that haven't visited have sent representatives to murder your friends and neighbors for entertainment? None, of course. Then you're optimizing for the wrong scenario, David said bluntly. You're worried about theoretically offending hypothetical future visitors, while actual hostile entities are literally killing your people right now. Doctor, I understand that this is difficult, but you need to prioritize the survival of the humans who are actually alive over the comfort of aliens who may never exist. Zara listened to this exchange with growing fascination and horror. The logical precision with which David dismantled Dr. Martinez's concerns revealed a mind that was clearly accustomed to thinking through complex scenarios with life or death consequences. This wasn't the gentle botanist she'd married speaking. This was someone who understood strategy, tactics, and survival in ways she'd never suspected. David, she said quietly, how do you know all this? How do you know how to coordinate defensive strategies, how to modify life support systems as weapons, how to organize people in crisis situations? This isn't knowledge that botanists typically have. David was quiet for a long moment, his hands still working over the control systems as he continued transmitting information to the colony. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than it had been since the crisis began. Every human knows this, Zara. We just don't talk about it because it scares people. We learn in school as history and science and problem solving, but what we're really learning is how our ancestors survived being hunted by everything on Earth that was bigger, faster, and stronger than we were. We learn about chemistry so we can understand how to make tools and weapons from common materials. We learn about engineering so we can modify our environment to protect us and harm our enemies. We learn about biology so we can understand the weaknesses of anything that might threaten us. He paused, looking directly at her. We learn about tactics and strategy and coordination because those were the skills that kept our species alive long enough to reach the stars. The only difference between a human botanist and a human soldier is that one of them thinks about growing things and the other thinks about killing things. But both of them know how to do both because that's what being human means. The communication channel suddenly erupted with sounds of conflict. Explosions, shouting, the unmistakable noise of battle echoed through the bridge of the stellar dawn. David, they're attacking in force now. They figure out that we're doing something, and they're trying to stop us. Dr. Martinez's voice was strained with panic. David's transformation was instantaneous and complete. Gone was any trace of the reflective botanist. In his place stood someone who radiated cold, lethal competence. Doctor, how many of the atmospheric modifications have been implemented? About 60%, but water filtration? Maybe 40% complete. Structural modifications? We've barely started. David's voice cut through Dr. Martinez's panic like a blade. Doctor, listen to me very carefully. You don't need all the modifications to be complete. You just need enough of them to make the attackers understand that they're no longer hunting humans. You need enough to make them realize that now the humans are hunting them. The sounds of battle from Proxima Colony continued to echo through the bridge of the stellar dawn as David coordinated the human response with a precision that left the alien crew members speechless. Zara watched her husband orchestrate what could only be described as a masterpiece of tactical thinking, using nothing more than the colony's existing infrastructure and the ingenuity of 50,000 desperate humans. Dr. Martinez, I need you to activate the atmospheric processors in sections, starting with the eastern perimeter where they initially breached, David commanded, his fingers dancing over multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Don't try to affect the entire colony at once. Create zones of altered atmosphere that force them to move in predictable patterns. David, What exactly will the atmospheric changes do to them? Dr. Martinez asked, his voice tight with stress as explosions continued in the background. The modifications introduce trace gases that are completely harmless to human physiology, but will cause severe respiratory distress in most oxygen-breathing species that aren't specifically adapted to Earth-normal atmospheres, David explained clinically. Think of it as turning their environment hostile while keeping yours perfectly safe. Commander Vex approached David with obvious reluctance. Mr. Chin, I must ask, how do you know these atmospheric modifications will be effective against unknown alien physiology? David never looked up from his displays. Because, Commander, humans have tested atmospheric warfare against every major biological configuration we've ever encountered. We catalog the vulnerabilities of every species we meet, not out of malice, but because it's what kept us alive long enough to meet them. The casual way David spoke about having tested atmospheric warfare against other species sent a collective shiver through the bridge crew. Zara realized that her husband wasn't just improvising these defenses. He was drawing from a comprehensive database of knowledge about how to neutralize alien threats. Dr. Martinez, status report. David called into the communicator. The eastern perimeter atmospheric changes are active, came the reply, now punctuated by different sounds. The explosions had lessened, but there were new noises, choking, confusion, what sounded like retreat. David, it's working. They're falling back from the affected areas. Some of them appear to be experiencing severe respiratory distress. Good. Now activate the water system modifications in the central residential area. They'll try to regroup there because it appears to be the safest location from their perspective. What will the water modifications do? The filtration systems are now introducing compounds that are absorbed through skin contact and respiratory exposure. For humans, these compounds will cause mild euphoria and increased alertness, basically making everyone feel energetic and focused. For most alien biochemistries, the same compounds will cause disorientation, muscle weakness, and eventually unconsciousness. Zara stared at her husband in horror. David, you're describing chemical warfare. David finally looked up at her, his expression unreadable. Zara, I'm describing survival. Those entities chose to attack a human colony. They chose to kill innocent people. They chose to make this a fight for survival. I'm simply ensuring that the right species survives. Dr. KYTH's antennae began twitching rapidly again. David, these defensive measures you're implementing, they seem remarkably sophisticated for emergency protocols. How long have humans been preparing for scenarios like this? Since before we left Earth, David replied matter-of-factly. Every human colony, every human ship, every human settlement maintains defensive protocols based on the assumption that eventually someone will try to kill us. We've learned not to wait until we're under attack to figure out how to survive being under attack. The communication channel crackled with Dr. Martinez's voice, now carrying a note of grim satisfaction. David, the water system modifications are active. The attackers who moved into the central area are showing signs of severe impairment. Several have collapsed entirely. Excellent. Now, for the final phase. Doctor, I need you to activate the structural modifications we discussed. It's time to demonstrate to these attackers what happens when you corner a species that conquered an entire planet not through strength, but through intelligence. What exactly are the structural modifications? Commander Vex asked, his skepticism now replaced by morbid curiosity. David smiled, and Zara realized that this particular expression had moved beyond cold into something approaching terrifying. Every human structure is designed with multiple failure points that can be triggered remotely. We can cause specific sections to collapse while leaving others intact, create barriers where none existed before, reroute passages to trap intruders in confined spaces, and redirect environmental systems to create zones of extreme temperature, pressure, or atmospheric composition. He manipulated the colony display, showing how the seemingly peaceful residential structures could be transformed into an elaborate maze of traps. But the most important feature, Commander, is that every structural modification is designed to be survivable for humans, while being lethal for anyone who doesn't know how to navigate them safely. You're talking about turning the entire colony into a weapon, Zara said quietly. I'm talking about turning the entire colony into a demonstration, David corrected. A demonstration of what happens when you attack humans in their own home. The sounds from the colony began to change dramatically. The confident, coordinated assault that the attackers had been conducting devolved into chaos. Shouts of confusion, panic, and pain echoed through the communication channel. David, they're trapped, Dr. Martinez reported, his voice now carrying an edge of awe. The ones who aren't incapacitated by the atmospheric and water modifications are caught in the structural maze. They can't find their way out, and every path they try leads to more hostile environment. Now for the lesson, David said grimly. He activated the colony's communication system, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach the attacker's equipment. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that seemed to fill the entire bridge of the stellar dawn. Attention hostile forces. This is David Chun, speaking for the human colony you have attacked. You came here believing humans were prey. You killed our administrator and terrorized our families because you thought we were weak. You have made a fundamental error in judgment. The sounds of chaos from the colony continued in the background as David delivered what could only be described as a lecture to beings who were currently dying from exposure to modified human environment. Humans are not prey. We never were prey. We're the species that learned to hunt the hunters, to trap the trappers, to kill the killers. You thought our lack of natural weapons made us vulnerable. What actually made us was creative. You thought our peaceful nature made us harmless. What actually made us was efficient. He paused, letting the sounds of the attacker's distress punctuate his words. You are currently experiencing what humans call environmental warfare. Your air is poisoned. Your water is toxic. Your environment is hostile. Every step you take leads deeper into a trap designed by 50,000 humans who have had several hours to prepare for your arrival. The communication channel carried sounds of increasingly desperate attempts by the attackers to escape the colony, but the maze of modified structures and hostile environments seemed to be thwarting every effort. You have two choices, David continued relentlessly. You can surrender and submit to human judgment, or you can die slowly as your biology fails to adapt to an environment that has been optimized for human survival and hostile to your physiology. A new voice came through the communication system, clearly one of the attackers. The translation systems struggled with the language, but the tone of desperation was universal. Humans cease, we surrender. We did not know. David's expression didn't soften in the slightest. You didn't know what? That humans were capable of defending themselves? That killing our administrators would have consequences? That attacking our families would result in your own destruction? We thought humans were weak prey. And what do you think now? David asked, his voice carrying the cold satisfaction of someone whose point had been comprehensively proven. Humans are predators. David nodded, though the gesture was lost on the surrendering attackers. Yes, we are. We're the predators that learned to look like prey until it was too late for anything that threatened us to realize their mistake. He turned to Commander Vex, his expression businesslike. Commander, we'll need to maintain these environmental modifications until we can arrange for the proper authorities to take custody of the surrendering attackers. The humans will need to wear protective equipment when dealing with them, but the colony should be safe now. Commander Vex stared at David with something approaching fear. Mr. Chun, in the space of several hours, you've demonstrated capabilities that suggest humans are far more dangerous than any species in this sector has realized. Should we be concerned about human expansion into this region? David's expression softened slightly, and, for a moment, Zara saw traces of the gentle botanist she'd married. Commander, humans are only dangerous to species that try to harm us or those under our protection. We've spent centuries learning to be peaceful because we're very good at being the alternative. He looked around the bridge at the assembled alien crew members. We don't want to be predators, Commander. We've learned that cooperation and mutual benefit are more sustainable than conquest and domination. But when someone forces us to choose between being victims and being the thing that nightmares are made of, we'll choose to be the nightmare every single time. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the communicator again, now calm and controlled. David, all hostile forces have either surrendered or been neutralized. The colony is secure. How do you want us to proceed? Doctor, maintain the environmental modifications until proper authority arrives. Document everything about the attackers, their technology, their biology, their stated motivations. And Doctor, yes, make sure this incident is reported to every human settlement, every human ship, and every human authority in the sector. It's important that everyone understands what happened here today. What exactly happened here today? Dr. Martinez asked. David looked directly at Zara as he answered. Today, some aliens learned that humans have spent 10,000 years pretending to be harmless. And they learned what happens when we stop pretending. In the weeks following the incident at Proxima Colony, the Stellar Dawn had become something of a phenomenon throughout the sector. Word of what humans could accomplish when threatened spread rapidly among the various species, and the gentle botanist who had orchestrated the defense became a figure of both fascination and fear among alien populations. Zara found herself struggling to reconcile the two versions of David she now knew existed. During the day, he returned to his plants with the same gentle care he'd always shown, singing softly to his tomatoes and carefully adjusting their growing conditions with infinite patience. But she'd seen the other David now, the one who spoke of environmental warfare and systematic neutralization of threats with the casual expertise of someone who'd spent a lifetime studying such things. The Xenobiology department on Kepler Station has requested an interview with you, she told him one morning as he worked in their quarter small garden. They want to understand human defensive capabilities for their research into interspecies conflict resolution. David looked up from his seedlings, his expression thoughtful. What did you tell them? I told them I'd ask you, but I suspect you're not interested in explaining how humans think about warfare to aliens who might someday be on the wrong side of that knowledge. David's smile was warm, the expression of the gentle man she'd fallen in love with. Actually, Zara, I think it's important that they understand. The goal isn't to keep human capabilities secret. The goal is to make sure everyone knows that attacking humans is a mistake that won't end well for the attackers. He returned to his work, his hands moving with practiced care among the delicate plants. The only way peace works is if everyone involved understands the consequences of breaking it. Those attackers at Proxima Colony made the mistake of thinking humans were weak because they didn't see us as a threat. That kind of misunderstanding costs lives. Commander Vex had requested a formal debriefing about the incident, and the session had revealed information that left the entire command crew reconsidering everything they thought they knew about human space exploration. Mr. Chun, Commander Vex had begun. Our analysis of the defensive protocols you implemented suggests that they weren't improvised responses to an emergency. The sophistication and coordination required for what you accomplished indicates extensive planning and preparation. How long have humans been developing these capabilities? David had answered with characteristic directness. Since before we left Earth, Commander. Every human colony, every human ship, every human settlement is established with the understanding that eventually someone might try to destroy it. We planned for that possibility from the beginning. But you present yourselves as peaceful explorers and researchers. We are peaceful explorers and researchers, David had replied. But we're also survivors. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Being peaceful doesn't mean being helpless, and being prepared for conflict doesn't mean seeking it. The formal report from the incident had made fascinating reading for anyone interested in human psychology and capabilities. The attackers, who called themselves the Kresh, had been a nomadic species that sustained themselves by raiding less advanced civilizations. They had approached Proxima Colony under the assumption that humans were typical prey, weak, disorganized, and easily overwhelmed by superior force. The interrogation of the surviving creche had revealed their complete shock at encountering organized human resistance. According to their statements, humans were supposed to be one of the weakest species in the galaxy. No natural weapons, no armor, no psychic abilities, no apparent aggressive instincts. The humans, one captured creche had stated through translation, they changed everything. The air became poison, the water became poison, the very ground became a trap. They turned their entire world against us. We have never encountered prey that could make the environment itself into a weapon. Dr. Martinez had submitted his own report describing the human response from the colonial perspective. According to his account, the transformation among the colonists had been remarkable. People who had spent years engaged in peaceful research, agriculture, and family life had immediately and efficiently organized themselves into a coordinated defensive force. It was like watching a different species, Dr. Martinez had written. These were the same people who attended our children's birthday parties and shared meals together every evening. But when the attack came, they became something else entirely. Not violent, exactly, but utterly focused and completely ruthless. They turned our entire colony into a weapon system in a matter of hours, using nothing but standard equipment and coordination that seemed to come from nowhere. The report had continued. What struck me most was how normal it seemed to them. No one questioned David's authority when he began coordinating our response. No one hesitated to implement modifications that they understood were designed to kill our attackers. It was as if they'd been waiting their entire lives for someone to threaten us, so they could demonstrate what humans were actually capable of. Zara had read these reports with growing understanding of something that both impressed and terrified her about her husband's species. Humans weren't pretending to be peaceful. They genuinely were peaceful by choice and preference. But their capacity for violence, when necessary, was far beyond what anyone had realized. "David," she said one evening as they shared dinner in their quarters, "I've been thinking about what happened at the colony. About what you said about humans learning to pretend to be harmless." David looked up from his meal, giving her his full attention. "What about it? Were you lying to me? About who you are, what humans are capable of, what your species is really like?" David was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "Zara, everything I've shown you about who I am is true. I love growing things. I enjoy peaceful research. I prefer cooperation to conflict. I find violence personally distasteful, and I avoid it whenever possible." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "But I'm also human, which means I'm capable of doing whatever is necessary to protect the people I care about. The capacity for violence doesn't make someone violent, Zara. It just makes them capable of choosing violence when peace isn't an option. But the knowledge you demonstrated, the coordination abilities, the tactical thinking, where did all that come from?" David smiled, and this time his expression carried the warmth she'd fallen in love with rather than the cold calculation she'd come to fear. "Every human learns those things, Zara. We learn them in school as problem-solving and critical thinking and emergency preparedness. We learn them through games and entertainment that simulate conflict scenarios. We learn them through stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they're threatened." He reached across the table to take her hand. "We don't think of it as military training because it isn't separate from everything else we learn. It's just part of being human. We learn to build things, and we learn to destroy things. We learn to heal, and we learn to harm. We learn to create, and we learn to eliminate threats to what we've created." Zara felt the warmth of his touch through her crystalline form. "And you really don't want to use those capabilities?" "Zara, I'd rather spend the rest of my life growing tomatoes and studying plant biology than ever have to coordinate another defensive action like what happened at Proxima Colony. But if someone threatens you, threatens our future children, threatens innocent people who are under our protection, then I'll become whatever I need to become to stop them." The honesty in his voice was unmistakable, and Zara realized that this was actually more reassuring than disturbing. Her husband wasn't a hidden predator waiting for an excuse to emerge. He was exactly who she'd always known him to be, but with capabilities she hadn't understood. What happens now, she asked, now that everyone knows what humans are capable of? David's expression grew thoughtful. Now everyone makes better decisions about whether they want humans as friends or enemies. The creche certainly won't be raiding any more human colonies. And hopefully other species who might have been considering humans as easy targets will reconsider that assessment. He squeezed her hand gently. But mostly, Zara, what happens now is that humans continue to be peaceful, cooperative, and focused on mutual benefit with our alien neighbors. We just do it with the understanding that everyone involved knows what the consequences would be if that peace were broken. 3 months later, Zara received a communication from the Xenobiology Department on Kepler Station. Their research into interspecies conflict resolution had reached some fascinating conclusions. Dr. Zura, the transmission began. Our analysis of the Proxima Colony incident has revealed something remarkable about human psychology. Humans appear to be the only species we've encountered that has achieved true voluntary pacifism. Most peaceful species are peaceful because they lack the capacity for effective violence. Humans are peaceful despite having extraordinary capacity for violence. The transmission continued. This makes them uniquely trustworthy as allies, because their commitment to peace is a choice rather than a limitation. It also makes them uniquely dangerous as enemies, because they can choose to abandon peace without any of the usual constraints that limit aggressive capabilities in other species. The conclusion of the research was particularly striking. We recommend that all species in this sector prioritize positive relationships with human settlements and colonies. Humans appear to be genuinely interested in cooperation and mutual benefit, but they are also capable of defending themselves with efficiency that borders on artistic. The wisest policy is to ensure that they never need to demonstrate those capabilities again. Zara shared this communication with David as he worked in their expanded garden, which now included specimens from several different worlds they'd visited. Artistic efficiency? David laughed, a sound that carried genuine amusement. I like that description, though I hope we never have to demonstrate it again. Do you think we will? Zara asked. David looked up from his plants, his expression serious but not grim. Zara, the universe is a big place with a lot of different species, and some of them are going to make poor decisions about humanity regardless of what they've heard about Proxima Colony. But yes, I think word will spread. I think most potential aggressors will choose to find easier targets. He returned to his work, his hands moving with the same gentle care she'd always known. And in the meantime, humans will continue being exactly what we've always been. Scientists, explorers, farmers, artists, and builders who happen to be very good at protecting what we've built. Zara watched her husband tend to his plants, finally, understanding that the contradiction she'd perceived between his gentle nature and his demonstrated capabilities wasn't actually a contradiction at all. David was precisely what he appeared to be, a peaceful man who was very good at ensuring that peace was maintained. As she watched him work, singing softly to his tomatoes, as if the most efficient defensive coordination in the sector's recent history had never happened, Zara realized that perhaps the most remarkable thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence, but their genuine preference for everything else. They had become apex predators not because they enjoyed hunting, but because they wanted to be left alone to pursue the things they actually cared about. And that, she thought as David looked up and smiled at her with the same warm affection he'd always shown, might be the most human thing of all.